Can you feel it? The beckoning call of the wild. The kindling in your spirit when you hear the untamed howls of the wilderness. The immolation in your blood as the thrill of the hunt pours over you. Smoldering remains of your enemies lay in waste behind as you conquer and bond with beasts of unwavering loyalty and ferocity. And only whispers dare call your name, as all fear the swift death that falls from your aim, for you are the hunter.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of the Cloak and Quiver podcast. Double digits, mind you, hooray, good for us, well done, trucking right along. And it's good to be back. It's been busy from work and was sick for about a week and just all sorts of mess. But here we are back for our beta episode, and I'm excited to get into this, guys, because there's a lot of really cool stuff going on right now that I'm thankful to be a part of in the beta. And but before we get started with all that, I want to go over just a few more things, kind of give you guys an update as to what's going on, what we're doing, the things in motion, and then we'll get into some meaty topics. So first thing I want to talk about is I have a week left of work. I'm seasonally employed with the city of Phoenix, and I have 1 week left, and don't get me wrong, I love my job and I love work, but I have 7 days left and then I am free. It's been so stressful this year, guys, working overtime and stuff like that. It was a big undertaking, but it's going to be nice to have some time to myself for a good long while. So the website also is coming along, cloakandquiver.com. It has been launched, and remember I said on last episode that I wanted to take user submissions, as this is the podcast for the hunter community by the hunter community, and I've gotten a couple, and they were really fun to put up, stories or transmogs entries and stuff like that, and I had a good time with that. Also, I put the show feeds up there for you guys, hunter resources. It's still a work in progress, and with more time on my hands, it's gonna get moving right along nicely. But if you guys want to check that out, cloakandquiver.com. If you want to submit anything, there's also the show email as well, so I can get that up on the site. So the all hunter raids that we were talking about, those are actually got quite a following. Those are still going very strong. The horde side, US horde side ones that I'm going to try and get a part of, or at least be a part of. There's a strategy meeting going on tonight as of recording the show that I'm going to attend and try and get a spot on the roster as well. There are still plans for an all hunter, I wouldn't say Cloak and Quiver sanction, but at least something that we want to try and offer through the show in early August, which is in 2 weeks from now, which is exciting because I'm not working, yay. But aside from that, I'll have a lot more free time to do stuff and be a little bit more interactive with the community, which I'm ecstatic for. I can't wait. So with that out of the way, I think that's about all we have to talk about pre-show wise. Let's move right into it with some of the new content that's been released in the last week or two. So first things first, I did get a beta invite. I think it was 4 days ago. And I've spent a little time on the beta. What I mainly did was I made a level 90, or character copied my 90 over, and I kind of fiddled around a little bit with the garrisons and just the questing in the scenario that you start out with. But then I went right over to the level 100 realm and started messing around with a lot of the talents and how it plays at max level, how the classes play at max level. And I gotta say, I have some thoughts on all 3 of the specs, and we'll get into that in just a minute, but we'll break all the specs down and as it stands in beta in just a minute. But I want to talk about some of the changes that have happened that are still, 1, relevant, and 2, still in the beta. They haven't been removed yet. There's been a few that have been introduced and then revoked, so we won't go over those. But one of the ones I noticed for the tier bonuses that keep getting reworked, and these ones are cool. I like these ones more than the last ones, and then even way more than the last ones, which were just like super basic, static damage increases. So let's get right into the Beast Mastery one, of course, the king of all 3 of the hunter specs. And the first one is almost laughable. So Kill Command has a 25% chance to reset the cooldown on Bestial Wrath. I mean, come on, does that first of all, amazing, right? I mean, Big Red Pet, Bestial Wrath signature, it's BM's almost signature, and you can have a chance to have near 100% uptime on Bestial Wrath if RNGs favor you. you know how I am with RNG. I don't mean to suck the fun out of this tier bonus, but I mean, how ridiculous. There's going to be some fights where you're just, I mean, you're going to be so happy, you know, your heart is singing with joy and your pet is just tearing it up, and then there's going to be the next pull where you don't, where every Bestial Wrath is on a 1 minute cooldown, or like maybe 54 seconds or something like that. So you know how I feel about RNG. I've been very expressed with that throughout the entire show series so far, but it's still fun. Like, don't let me suck the fun out of this, because it's still an awesome tier and it's going to be super OP when it lines up. But and then there is the RNG counterpart to it, where I'm just like, well, this could not happen ever for some people, and then for some people, they're going to get, the rank 1 parses because this was up the whole time. That's just my opinion on it. And then the 4-piece is cool. While Bestial Wrath is active, we've talked about this before, 1 additional pet is summoned to fight with you, and we're not going to talk too much about this, because 1, we did on last show, and then 2, we still have no idea whether it's going to work like a dire beast, or if it's actually going to be one of your pets in your stable. Is it going to have abilities that it can use? We have no idea, so that's kind of still TBD, to be determined. But survival does have some interesting ones and some talking points as well. So the 2-piece for survival is Black Arrow deals damage 33% more often. And you go, okay, so it just ticks faster. And then you read the 4-piece. When you hit a target with explosive shot, your multi-strike damage is increased by 25% for 3 seconds. And as we know now, multi-strike is the core stat that survival is working with. So, replicating shots. And if you mesh those 2 set bonuses together, multi-strike actually works really well between the 2. It's got some great synergy with this tier. And what was just released it was either today or yesterday. Sometimes it just fades together on MMO Champion with all the beta updates. Multi-strike from your Black Arrow is going to be the only thing that can proc lock and load. So multi-strike Black Arrows are what procs your lock and load. So your extra explosive shots, which is a little crazy, but with these tier bonuses, they work well together. So with Black Arrow dealing damage 33% more often, that's 33% more often chance for multi-strikes. I'm not a mathematician, don't try and work numbers with me. But then the 4-piece, when you hit a target with explosive shot, your multi-strike damage is increased by 25%, so it just boosts your damage even higher. So that's cool. I'm down with that. We'll get into it later, but I'm probably not going to play survival unless it's a really strong damage throughput. And we'll get to that in a bit. But let's go into Marksman tier bonuses, which are okay. So the 2-piece aim shot critical strikes restore an additional 10 focus. Now, as we know already, one of the perks, man, there's so much in the beta. One of the perks for the multi-strike, or the marksmanship, that we're going to have to get used to is aim shot crits restore 20 focus. So with the tier, it's going to restore 30 focus. And we'll talk about this in the spec discussion as well, but just asterisk that. Keep an eye on that one. And then the 4-piece is, while rapid fire is active, your critical strike damage is increased by 5% per second. So critical strike damage. And this could be huge with the new mastery that Marksman has, the sniper training, which is when you stand still, you gain a buff that increases your damage dealt, your critical strike damage dealt, and increases your shot range as well. And which one, we'll talk about this in a minute. It's cool, and it works really well with this tier, because you can remember, so when rapid fire is up, your critical strike damage is increased by 5% per second. So towards the tail end of rapid fire, you could see aim shots and the like getting anywhere from 200 to 300% increased critical strike damage, which is going to be some fat hits. So that's going to be kind of fun to play with. And I'm going to say it now before we get into the meat of it. Marksman looks awesome. From my perspective, there's been some discussion on it about it kind of being a little lackluster, which ability-wise maybe a little bit, but it was fun to play on the beta, which I'll talk about in a minute. So those are the tier bonuses that have been updated for the first tier of rating. And another fun little thing that happened with Marksman 2 is Chimera Shot got updated. It's now renamed, so they're adding an E in between Chimera, so the E's in there. And it also is a cleave ability, so the damage still stays the same. It's not going to be split between the 2 targets. It's a nice cleave. And what it does is it toots. Wow, it shoots 2 shoots 2 Chimera heads out of your ranged weapon, and they travel to the 2 closest targets. From my understanding, one is your primary target, and then the one closest next to it. I tried it out on the dummies, and I put a turnip punching bag in between the dummies as well to try and see like how close it got. And it looks like it is the closest target, but it's kind of hard to tell. I did my best beta testing. All right, give me a break. And so, but this is really cool because Marksman actually has a good cleave. I'm not talking like full on AoE. I'm talking a cleave onto the second target, which is really cool because with survival it was a multi-shot and you were done. It was easy. You could just keep that serpent sting up rolling on the second target. With BM it was beast cleave, which you always did with 2 targets anyway. And now Marksman just has a built-into Chimera shot, which is #rock on. I really like that. It's easy to use. It's awesome. And what's even cooler about it is it either deals frost or nature damage. There's a little topic on this too. So if it's only one target, it's a toss up between either 2. But if it's both targets, one is nature and one is frost. But what's interesting, and I read this online, is that someone was kind of concerned. Was like, well, I thought Marks was supposed to be the physical damage dealers, and well, yes, it is. Marks has always been very heavily focused around physical damage dealing. 2 things come to mind. The first one is it's really nice against certain types of, I guess you could say PvP instances. Like, say you get silenced as a hunter and you get nature locked. Well, you could maybe, this is just a speculation, still use Chimera Shot because it's going to deal the frost damage instead as its counterpart. Just a guess. But I also like that it's a little I guess you could say aesthetic or kind of symbolic, right? Because chimeras in the game, they like Frostfire Breath and the nature damage. I feel like it's kind of a nod to the lore of a chimera as well, which I think is cool. And then they're also going to rework the graphic on it as well. Like right now, it's just 2 little Dragonhawk heads. But they plan on. Wouldn't it be awesome if a gigantic, like a chimera, came flying out of our gun, or like a very swift serpent kind of chimera-esque shot, kind of like how when Cobra Shot was introduced, it is an actual cobra head flying towards the target. That would be awesome. Like make it something totally cool and over the top, just blown out of proportion. That'd be awesome. But yeah, so that's Chimera Shot, which just got updated, which I think is cool. I like it. And before we move on to the spec discussion, I want to kind of talk a little bit about some of the changes that define the specs that have happened on beta so far that kind of makes sense to know before we talk about them. So with marksmanship, one of the big ones is the sniper training, which is going to interact really well with crit. Like you're going to want to be able to crit a lot during your sniper training buff because of that critical damage booster. So that was kind of the hidden crit bonus for marksmanship we were waiting to hear about. And then survival is a little bit different in that multi-strike is their big secondary stat modifier booster deal. And that is going to interact with the lock and load a lot because it procs, the multi-strike procs from that black arrow damage to give you those lock and loads. And at first I was like, well, hang on a second, because what if we're like a fresh 90 and we don't have any multi-strike, gear? There's 2 things we can do. One is on the beta, my Harm's Talisman. So grab a Harm's Talisman if you're playing survival in beta before it goes live, so you can have multi-strike to kind of enjoy survival a bit more, because without it, it's very bland. Or so they also just introduced a 10% multi-strike bonus at level 10. So when you get to be level 10 and you choose your specialization, they give you a multi-strike bonus as well. So it's 10%, which is kind of, it's 10%. But it's a starting point. But yeah, so let's talk about these specs, the 3 specs I got to kind of sit down and tinker with on beta, and my impressions on them as well. And the big one I want to talk about first and foremost is marksmanship. It was the one I was most excited for in beta, and I took focusing shot to try it out because it really seemed like the tier out of the tier 100 talents, it was the one that really spoke to marksman. Being stationary, firing a shot that deals more physical damage, the whole 9 yards, generating tons of focus, and it had a good feel to it. But the one thing I did notice was it was very easy to focus cap, especially during rapid fire, and even if you took Fervor. I was rolling Fervor for a little bit on the beta testing, and it was very, very easy to focus cap. Even with 120 focus now, that all 3 specs have 120 focus. But it was just kind of like, okay, focus capping kind of sucks. So what I ended up doing was making a cancel aura macro for my focusing shot, and then just having to cancel it right, and then cast Chimera or aim shot instead, so I didn't, go over the hump rather. And so with that in mind, I was like, okay, I'm going to toss Fervor out, because obviously this is making things a little bit more frustrating. And I took Thrill of the Hunt now, because Thrill of the Hunt doesn't do just arcane shots and multi-shots. Now it does arcane shots, multi-shots, and aim shots. And it reduces the focus of your aim shot by 20, so it makes it a 30 focus when this thing is up. Oh, and by the way, Thrill of the Hunt has an awesome new graphic that I don't need to have a weak aura made for anymore. It's 3 arrows next to your character on both sides, and then they go away for each charge used, and it's really cool. So, back to the topic. Aim shot now costs 30 focus if you have Thrill of the Hunt. And remember, with the tier, this is where that asterisk comes back in. If you have the tier bonus and you roll Thrill of the Hunt, your aim shot criticals are going to be free. Free focus, which is awesome. But also leads to, is this going to focus cap me or not? And we're going to keep that in mind. That's what I'm liking so much about Marksman, as I'll talk about in a minute, is it's actually really dynamic playstyle. Because with Thrill of the Hunt, I could almost keep it up at 100% uptime, depending on what I was casting. I was using Glaive Toss as my level 90 talent. And I like the dynamic playstyle a lot. I could keep, like I said, I could keep Toth at about near 100% uptime, but it was fun to play with my focus when it wasn't up. So say my focus jump went from 30 to 50, I had to be ready for that in that event, and it was kind of nice to be able to think ahead, which was cool. I haven't actually seen that in a rotation, a variable like that in our rotation since forever. I don't even think many classes have something like that. Maybe Warriors with like focus dumping. I don't play Warriors, but that's what I enjoyed most about playing Marksman with Thrill of the Hunt and the focusing shot was how my focus through exchange, I guess you could say, changed, and that was actually really fun for me to be able to have to adapt to my rotation. Was it going to be a 30 focus dump or a 50 focus dump? And then of course Chimera shot being 35 focus actually, but it was nice to play with, and I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. It made it dynamic and interesting, which was what I was looking for. So there's that tidbit, and then there's a little bit more with Marksman I want to talk about too, and that was getting out of the focusing shot groove, because the level 100 talents are pretty amazing. I like exotic ammunition, I like the focusing shot, and I like the idea of Lone Wolf. All 3 of them really appeal to me. So I'm like, okay, well, what if I just kind of broke this and say I'm not going to play with focusing shot as Marksman? So what I did was I took exotic munitions and I tried it out with steady shot, and I have to say, unless the exotic munitions or Lone Wolf comes out ahead on the damage meters, I am definitely going to play focusing shot, because it's 50 focus return on a 3-second cast, whereas steady shot is a 14-second focus return on a 2-second cast. You can do the math on that one. Focusing shot is a lot of focus return for hardly any penalty. It's just a 1 global cooldown, 1 second penalty. And I really enjoyed that. I was like, wow, focusing shot is awesome. And so basically it's just a second longer with almost 4 times the focus return, and you can really ride that focus wave as well. So getting that 50 focus back. So say you just use Chimera shot. So you've just put your number 1 damaging ability on cooldown, 9 seconds. And say you have like maybe 10 or 15 focus left, and so you cast focus shots. Now you're at 60, which is enough for 2 aim shots under Thrill of the Hunt. But by the time you've casted those 2 aim shots, you've already regenerated an additional 30 focus, and you can cast a 3rd aim shot. So what I found myself being able to do was cast 3 aim shots and the focusing shot in between my Chimera cooldown, and I was having a lot of fun doing that. And sometimes that changed. Like if I didn't have Thrill, I would have to do maybe 2 aim shots and 2 focusing shots. So that was what I was enjoying, was that the fact that my rotation changed. And without any tier, it was just my playstyle that I had chosen with Thrill of the Hunt, and I was totally down with that. So that was my Marksman playstyle impression. Now, I do want to talk about the mastery really quick, though, which, as we know, is the sniper training. And the thing that kind of bummed me out the most, it was what I was expected. You can only get by with keeping the buff from minimal movement, and I mean like literally sidestepping maybe 7 or 8 feet to the left or the right, forward, back, whatever, or the buff will fall off by the time that it takes to regenerate. So, regenerate the buff back on you again. And anything more drastic than that, like repositioning yourself across the room for like a phase change, or moving out from like a desecrated weapon on Garrosh, and the buff is going to fall off. Like I could think of a ton of circumstances in this tier alone where there is nothing that I could do about keeping my mastery up. And I understand that there is somewhat of a skill cap to use this effectively, but I think unless maybe someone can shed light to a different point of thinking that it's bad design if there's nothing you can do about finding and keeping optimal damage during raid encounters. Like if the game is saying you can't use your mastery right here, I think that's really lame. Like if you have to move super far away from an ability, or you get targeted with a debuff or something like that, like that's weak to me. I'm not digging that. Unless someone can say, hey, look, here's another perspective, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I could see that. But if the game is literally saying in certain instances that you can't use your mastery, I'm not down with that. So the mastery is the only tough thing I'm having to kind of swallow with the Marksman spec so far. My suggestion is just up the buff's fuse timer to an additional 2 seconds to have left on you, because I feel like that's a little bit more appropriate to me. I actually kind of tested it out, like, okay, so if a desecrated weapon landed here and I ran out all the way to the stack point for the mind controls, would I still have the buff? Yes. And you can even, and here's the thing, and you can even play with this too. If you want to get on live servers right now and get the in-game timer out, you can count down how long 6 seconds is from you. So you hit go on the timer, you run for 6 seconds. That's how long you have until the buff falls off. And remember, even if you run for 3 seconds and hold still, it still takes an additional 3 seconds for that buff to appear on you. So again, like I had stated, your radius for movement is very limited with the mastery, which is the only downside I see to Marksman right now. But I mean, if Marksman really is supposed to be the sit down and turret spec, like it's kind of shaping out to be, so be it. But that's just kind of my only grievance so far. All right, so now we'll move into survival. We'll save BM for last. And survival, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, it felt very bland to me. The new changes to lock and load were very RNG based, as one might imagine, and because it's also interesting to see lock and load proc, but not being able to use those charges until the 6 second cooldown was available again. Like you could have maybe 3 seconds left on lock and load, it could proc, but you would still have to wait those 3 seconds to use those charges, which was a little lame. But I felt with Survival's 4 core abilities that it was really boring to me, and that you couldn't really mix it up. I tried to. I did. I was like, okay, so there's only 4 abilities I'm ever going to press in this spec, unless I take some cooldowns. And even with Murder of Crows or Stampede, and Fervor, of course, I felt like it was very excuse me, it was a very repetitive process, Survival was. And don't get me wrong, you could go right now and say, Solar, look, Marksman only has 4 buttons. And yeah, you're right, it does have 4 buttons, but the thing I enjoyed most about Marksman was that it changed with the play style that I chose, which I enjoyed. It changed up the gameplay. Now, don't get me, like, I will play the best spec, the best play style when WOT drops, just because of the rating atmosphere that I'm in. But what I enjoyed doing at a core value, Marksmanship blew Survival out of the water, just because Survival was just so repetitive. There was hardly any room for excitement. Don't get me wrong, you get multi-strike going in there and you got 3 blasts of lock and load, maybe the next one was 2. You kind of mix some things up again. I mean, I get that, but it just was very expected. It was a, what do you call that? I could really read my rotation, I guess, is if that's how you wanted to put it. Hardly any variables, I guess, if you wanted to be super precise. But that was kind of the thing. I was actually reading on the beta forums prior to getting the invite to kind of, see how do people think about the Hunter. And a lot of people were a little upset with the Marksmanship and Survival. Not the masteries, but just the specs themselves. They felt that with the ability pruning, it does feel weird to log in and not see Hunter's Mark, Serpent Sting, Arcane Shot for some specs, Kill Shot for some specs. The slice on abilities is definitely evident. You feel a little lackluster when you first log in. But then I kind of just sat down on a target dummy for a good half hour, and I was just like, all right, let's get comfy. And I just practiced my rotation over and over and over again. And you start to get a groove on, and I felt like I was okay with Marksman's, and Survival's was very boring, but it had a flow to it. But those 2 specs, I think that there could be another ability added for Survival, perhaps the cooldown. Make it something that isn't so lengthy, maybe a 1 minute cooldown for Survival, I think could be a lot more interesting, because it's still going to be used very frequently. And it might change up the gameplay, like having perhaps a cooldown that, when activated, whenever you multi-strike, it can decrease the cooldown of your Black Arrow or something like that, or increase its effect to multi-strike, so you can get even more lock and loads like that. At least you're doing something with the spec that you can have a little bit more fun with And, I think that's really what survival needs right now. Marksmanship, I still feel strongly about. I think if you have a beta, I say try my experience. And I know some of you guys will, when live launches, there's a broad audience out here. Some of you guys will play what's fun. Some of you guys will play what's best. But I still feel like Marksmanship is doing pretty solid. Not in the AoE department. AoE is still very weak as Marksman, as we might expect from the recent changes in beta, them removing piercing shots from the AoE. They increased the bombardment damage to 20% when you do multi-shots, but it's still not enough. But overall, as these two specs stand from a gameplay perspective, I think Marksman, in my opinion, is a little bit better off than Survival is. Survival really needs that cooldown, and I think it should be a short cooldown, because it's no fun to be doing this boring, repetitive gameplay, even if you do have high multi-strike later on in the tiers, without it ever changing. You have no execute, you have no burst damage unless you talent in for it, and I really feel like something that could interact with the core abilities of the spec, Black Arrow and Explosive Shot, then you might have some gold right there. But it does need that. I think that would be my beta feedback for that spec. All right, now to Beast Mastery is still very much the same, minus a few cooldowns. But it's got the same abilities, it's got the same flow, it's kill command on cooldown, squeeze the arcane shots in, and build back up with Cobra, except this time you don't have Serpent Sting or Rapid Fire or any of that. You've got, Bestial Wrath, and I took Dire Beast and Blink Strikes as well. But I took Focusing Shot on Beast Mastery, just for the heck of it, just to see, okay, how much can I change this up? And but with the near 3-second cast time it had at the haste levels that we were given, it did not jive well with kill command at all. And I went with the exotic munitions instead, which were fun. I really like all three of them. I would find myself using the incendiary and the poison ones more than the ice ones, unless in WoD they're going to give us a kite fight. That's fun to say, a kite fight, but where we have to kite ads or whatever. And but that's like the only time I'd ever use the icy one, unless I was PvPing. But yeah, BM is short and sweet, man. It's still a lot of the same stuff. You still have Focus Fire and Frenzy. Those still went through the beta, as I understood. For a while they were gone, but now Focus Fire is back as a cooldown, 30% haste. And I gotta tell you, I really like using Focusing Fire when Bestial Wrath has a 1 minute cooldown instead of a 39-second one. It's a lot bigger of a window to try and get those 5 stacks in instead of having to do it in 39 seconds. That's been really nice to look at and play with. But other than that, BM has remained. It's the exact same spec. So and I'm okay with that. It's always a nice fallback option, right? Like if you play BM a lot, it's just kind of nice to know. Well, in WoD, if I don't like the new changes, I can still play BM. But I imagine a lot of people are looking for new changes. Of course, that's the fun part about new expansions. But yeah, BM still the same. Overall impressions, though, beta is beta. I think that's the first thing to take away from this. Things have been changing almost faster than you can refresh the page at times. But I'm really enjoying Marksman, as I think you guys may have taken a hint on. I really enjoy the cast sequences a lot more than the spammy nature of BM, as it has been currently. Survival definitely needs some love, and then BM is just good old BM. So we'll keep this up to date now that I have, now that work's over and I can finally start getting back to the computer and back to the recording. And we'll just keep an eye on things because, so much subject to change in all of this. And Survival is going to get that reworking, and we have to take a look to see if Marksman gets a little bit more tightened up, because while I still think that the experience that I had with Marksman was a positive one, I know that there are a lot of people who still think that there could be some redesign, and I'm sure we might see a touch or two of that, and then we'll just take it from there. So I think those are my overall beta impressions. I hope you guys kind of found the inside a little useful, or at least interesting, and we'll see how it goes until launch. So. And there are still a few things I want to talk about before we wrap up the show. One of them is the Hunter Mythic Tier 17, I guess you would call it. So last week we talked about the Tier 17, with the turbine engine on the belt and how it looked Iron Hordy. And I kind of liked it. The helmet was a little, I'd probably mock the helmet, but other than that, I enjoyed it. And so then the Hunter Mythic Tier 17 came out, which is as kind of following the pattern with the tiers, and then the Mythics is kind of a little bit more fleshed out of the tier the Mythic is. It's a little more articulate, ornate, and I don't know about this one. I think it's the colors, because I don't like red. I don't know why. in what hunting scenario would you be wearing this very blood red armor? Maybe Hellfire Peninsula, maybe the Bladespire Mountains, but I can't think of anything else. I'm looking at this from an aesthetic standpoint. I mean, let's be real here. Even with the current tier we have now for Siege of Orgrimmar, the stinking Cyclops head. I mean, from a hunting perspective, like if you go to the game journal in the World of Warcraft website, you look at all these ranger pictures with hoods and capes and leaves, and then you go in game and you get these monstrosities, these machinations of who knows what, and you just kind of scratch your head. And don't get me wrong, I like certain things. Art is so subjective, but the Mythic kind of threw me off. The shoulders, it reminds me a lot of the first PvP tier in MoP. You know, with the dragon curled around our shoulders, that silver and gold dragon. There's a Rylak that's perched, a Rylak skull that's perched on one of our shoulders. Take a look. It's on the MMO Champion as well. I'm sure you could Google it. Also, it should be up on most social media right now. And that's my impression. No, I don't like the color scheme, and it seems like they could make a bit more of a hunter set. I was even kind of praising them on the first tier. It was like, oh, I just didn't go, I killed something and I put it on my shoulder. Well, it kind of went back to that. With the Mythic, will I wear the Mythic? No, I don't think so. Unless it looks just totally boss on a new Tarn model, I probably won't. So that's my standing on the Mythic. Give it a look for yourself. Let us know what you think. And with that, I think that's going to wrap up this show. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in for episode 10, finally in the double digits. A big hurrah for that. But before we do sign out completely, though, I want to just kind of remind you guys that I am very interested in your hunter submissions for the website, cloakandquiver.com. I would also love to hear beta stories and experiences. If you guys wanted to upload those and share them to fellow hunters as well, I would be more than happy to put that on the site for you. For those of you that just joined us or perhaps listening for the first time or just missed episode 9, I want to make our website kind of a hunter hub where you can, share stories and submit transmogs and just write about being a hunter or share ideas and stuff like that. And it's shaping up. I'm going to spend more time with the site, but it's shaping up to be a lot like that. So I'm excited for that. I'm also very excited for the All Hunter rating that I'm going to try and participate in. I'm going to get everyone in on this that I can. I'm kind of feeling the waters with this first one that I think it's like Shoot and Artemis Howl and Ricket. I think all of them are organizing this one, and I kind of want to see how it is run and what is needed before we do our counterpart with the Cloak and Quiver sanctioned, quote-unquote, hunter run. So I think that's going to do it. If you guys want to email the show, it's cloakandquiver@gmail.com. That's a great place to send questions. I've been doing a lot of log analysis, guys. If you have, I might be underperforming in my raid, here are my World of Logs. That sounds fun to say. I'll take a look at them. I'll review them, tell you what's going on. I've done video reviews as well. I had a guy videotape his experience in Siege of Orgrimmar, and I told him, I broke it down. Okay, here at 4:30, you could have done this instead of this. There's that. You can email the show for that, or you can email the show for website submissions, questions, comments, concerns, fan mail. I don't whatever you want. And if you want to follow the show for show updates, you can do that at Cloak and Quiver. That's on Twitter. And if you want to follow me for Warcraft and Hunter-related updates, you can do so at _solarflare. And I was also streaming. I stream from time to time. You can find that at twitch.tv/the_solarflare. And I was actually doing some CM runs when I was on streaming last. And then I'm sure you'll catch a beta stream once I can find something fun to stream other than me sitting in front of a target dummy. Perhaps some of you guys may find that fun. You can kind of do a Q&A. I don't know. There's still a lot on the horizon for the show, guys, and I'm excited to dig deeper into it once I have my schedule back in the coming months. So it's going to be awesome. I can't wait. Lots of big stuff to happen, and I'm so happy to have you guys along for the ride. So I think we're going to sign off. With that, thank you everybody for tuning in. Everyone have a great rest of the week, and I will see you on the flip side. Flip side. Flip side. Flip side.